morning, friends. It is a pleasure to welcome you all. Before I speak, it is my duty to explain to you even the name of the institute, why it is called Planning and Management. When we call it planning, we don't mean planning at the factory level, which is taught in every other institute. We teach that also. But beyond that, it is national economic planning which we teach at IIPM, macroeconomics and a review of management principles in the context of national economic planning. And we teach that so that our managers, when they work in their organization, they not only try to maximize the growth of their own organization, but also they try to coordinate the activities of their own organization with the national economic parameters so that the growth of the country as a whole is maximized. When we say that the growth of the country as a whole is maximized, then let us not forget what we mean by the country. Country does not consist of the 20% top, upper middle class and rich population. The country consists of the 80% at the bottom. Unless we take care of the 80% at the bottom, we have not created the purchasing power which is required to sell whatever we produce as per our potentiality. We can always produce less than potentiality. We can cater to the upper middle class and thereby deprive the people at the bottom of their right to live in dignity. This is what we have done in the last more than 63 years since independence. Our politicians have been clever enough from Nehru downwards to camouflage their real purpose that they are working as the agents of the exploiters. When they formed the Planning Commission, they forgot intentionally, not unintentionally, I say intentionally, one of the main objects of planning is the distribution of the fruits of growth. We have not cared to distribute the fruits of growth, and that limited our growth rate to 3.5% till 80. After 1980, the growth rate slowly moved upwards because of the globalization's beginning, and not because of, as we always claim our government, that it is because of Manmohan Singh's policy that India has the growth rate of 9%. No, it is not. Not only India, even Africa has a growth rate of 6%. Many other countries have growth rate of 7-8%, and they do not have Manmohan Singh. The growth rate is because capital is in abundance. When I was a student of economics, 55 years before, we learned in our colleges that in India we have the abundance of labor and scarcity of capital. And therefore, labor or manpower is a burden. We can't take care of them in the sense that they can be utilized productively. But today, the situation is reversed on the global platform. Capital is available in the developed countries and they do not know how to make use of it because their market is saturated with all the consumer goods that the technology produces. They have only the replacement demand, no growth of population, no growth of new appliances, and therefore no utilization of the capital. It is so much in abundance that even an institute like us, you could get a $3 million loan from Brussels Bank at 4.08%. In India, if you go to a bank, then you have to pay about 14% interest. There, you can negotiate loan even at 2-3%. We are very weak in the global scene, and even we could get loan at 4%. And therefore, it is not only that in our foreign exchange reserve, we have $300 billion. We have, in fact, if we take the initiative, $3 trillion and more available around the world. If we can utilize the money and pay back that money with that small interest rate, but we cannot utilize that money because we have learned only to cater to the needs of the upper part of the people. Our upper part of the people, they do not have that kind of demand. But if you would enlist the 80% at the bottom, they could create the biggest market in the world after China. And therefore you could utilize that capital. And you cannot, and therefore you keep $300 billion in reserve and keep it in turn in the American Treasury at 1.5% interest. A shame for an economist who claims to be one of the talented economists and is our Prime Minister. A shame for India that we earn money, we can't utilize inside the country, and we give it back to American Treasury at 1.5%. But the inflation in America is also around 2%. That means every year we are losing 1% of that money. And think of it if we could utilize it, and more from outside. We don't need 300 billion to keep in reserve for any emergency. Normally a country keeps in reserve about 10% of the foreign trade money that is required, and hardly 30 billion. And for any emergent one needs all of a sudden another 30 billion. You could keep in reserve only 60 billion and that would suffice. Most of the countries around the world, they don't have even 60 billion in their reserve. And we are keeping 300 billion in their reserve because our brain power of the politicians do not know how to utilize it, because they are not committed to the people. If they would be committed to the people, they would know the potential huge demand in the country. They have also decided to strike in the public sector in a larger sense. The public sector has been killed. The management that you developed in the public sector is not operational anymore. What Tata and Ambani's can invest, that is all that India can invest, and no more. And Tata and Ambani can see the sectoral need, their own market. They can't see the whole market of India. It is not their responsibility. It is only the political power that is responsible to see the whole market of India. And therefore, along with the private sector, public sector should have had continued with investment, because they can invest in long term. They can assess the need of the people. I shall give you one example. Say in small scale industries, in West Bengal now we are celebrating second independence of West Bengal after we got rid of the Stalinist so-called left front people there after 34 years. Now Mamata can invite a nano factory there. How many people will get employment? 5,000? 10 nanos, 50,000? Unemployment in Bengal is around 70 lakhs. And these people cannot be employed in big industries. They can be employed in small-scale village industries. They cannot get the salary of 30,000 rupees in those industries. But 3,000, 5,000, 6,000, yes, they can get. But where is the market? The market does not develop automatically as you produce. In Venezuela, what they have done, whatever you produce, if it has a quality approved by them, they buy it up. The government buys it. And then they store it. And then over a period of time, they sell it, if necessary by giving subsidy. And that means all the products that are produced, whether at subsidized rate or sometimes with profit, they can be sold. And this means if people at the bottom, they produce billions of dollars, they can produce because they can sell. You don't produce anything unless you can sell. In India, the potential of selling is not there because the people at the bottom do not have the purchasing power. And unless you take care of the people at the bottom, unless you distribute the purchasing power for the people, you cannot utilize the potential growth rate. Therefore, when we established this institute, we thought that we shall be true to academic and we shall be true to our people. And only way to be true to our people was to stand up for the people, to speak in their interests, to devise management principles which should serve the people and not the 20% at the top. And that is why this institute is named Indian Institute of National Economic Planning and Management. The short form is Planning and Management. And unless you realize the purpose of the institute, unless you realize why this name and what it stands for, you will not realize in what way the intellectual capital which comes from this institute has today been ranked as number one. It took 30 years, but we have established that of all management institutes, in terms of intellectual capital, we are number one. This has been acknowledged, but sorry to say, our acknowledgement means nothing unless the fruits of that knowledge are utilized in practice. And that is not utilized because our politicians are agents of not only of capitalism but of crony capitalism, the worst form of capitalism. We are producing billionaires year after year. Our billionaires, they have money much more than even the number one like Bill Gates and others. Because when they have 35 billion, they have another 35 billion in black, which is not counted. And Bill Gates and others, they have hardly 40 billion. And then in terms of purchasing power, parity, you multiply that by 6 and it becomes 400 billion purchasing power, which our ABC, I will not name them. But you can imagine what is ABC. They have that kind of purchasing power. And with that kind of purchasing power, they can buy up number 1 to number 100 of all the politicians. This, I say so. And that is why we have scams after scams after scams and scams. And nothing follows as punishment. Nobody cares. As you come to this place, you find the CBI their office, a new office. Do you know that this year in the budget, Pranab Mukherjee has cut down the money for CBI? They don't want CBI to be active. Whereas we have calculated, to catch all the criminals, politicians to bureaucrats. We need to increase the budget of CBI by 3 times. We need to increase the budget of judiciary by 10 times. We need to increase the budget of police by 5 times. Unless you do this, you cannot put these criminals behind bars. And these, they never have the money. They have the money for other kinds of activities where they can get a cut out of this. While coming here and seeing the CBI office, my wife was telling, look, this must be a building of nothing. You know, most probably the money has already been shared by the politicians and they are just presenting a show of trying them. After some time, people will forget. Not a single political criminal, not a single bureaucrat has been punished in the last 63 years in the true sense of the term. And this is what we have in India, a total collaboration, a collusion called compulsions of alliance. It is not. It is a compulsions of greed and not the need of the people. And as you go on in this institute and learn from the academicians of the highest caliber, you will realize it. And it is our privilege to impart you the true education. Friends, let me tell you, as we look at education and as an educationist, I must tell that whatever skill and whatever knowledge you acquire even at this institute, you are not educated unless you know to share it with your neighbors, unless you know to share it with the neighboring countries, unless you know to give to others. A truly educated man is not, he does not live for satisfying his greed. He lives after satisfying his need for others. And we want you to be educated in that sense. We want that when you grow up, if political parameters change and you have a scope to decide the politics of the country, you stand for not 1% of the Indian national economy to be distributed to others, which UNO demands, and not a single developed country except Sweden gives it, America gives only 0.3%. You will stand for giving 10%, if not 16% of your GDP for others, so that you can bring up other countries like Africa at par with you. And if you give 16% to other countries, you must also, before that, have taken care of your people so that they live in dignity and not at the subhuman level. You must do it. You must know to give it to the people at the bottom. You must know to give it to the people around who are living in misery. Don't be proud that you will be a member of the Security Council today or tomorrow. To keep company with the rich is very easy. It is nothing. It will automatically come. But to be committed to the people at the bottom, not only of your country, but of people around the world, it makes you great. And you must strive for that kind of a greatness. India stands for it. And you must contribute to that civilizational change. And this institute, in a sense, stands for that civilization change and stands for that commitment to humanity. And when you are educated in that sense, not only in acquiring skills, I shall feel that our dream of establishing this institute has been a success. Thank you.